Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited for today's conversation. We're going to go over an article in the Reviews in Endocrine and Metabolic Disorders that came out in January of 2026. So a new study, new shiny object, which is what we like. And it's going to talk about the efficacy of different types of intermittent fasting in improving glycemic control in adults with overweight or obesity. Presentation, a systematic review, and network meta-analysis. So a gold standard nugget that we have found here in the research annals. Excited for a real-life application. If you're new to the podcast and you just went, what the heck did they just say? Don't worry. As we promised in the show open, we're going to give you one or two actionable steps that you can do today to improve your fasting lifestyle, to how to adapt from an old chronic diet mentality, on-off mindset into a sustainable lifestyle fasting adaptation. And if you want to know more about our transformations, mine, Tommy's, before you get into all of the slew of 330 plus episodes we have, head back to episode 0, episode 1, give it a listen. It'll give you some insights into why we believe fasting is the tool to get you the weight off once and for all, the improved health, lab, and metabolic benefits, and just get you to a place of confidence and enjoying your day-to-day life without that weight and pressure of the weight loss dieting mindset. So Tommy, I'm excited because this article is really going to talk about real life application of, what's our primary purpose? Most people come to fasting for weight loss, but there's so many other metabolic benefits and simplicity and adherence and application and sustainability, in our opinion, that we see. And we see this in our OGs, our fasting for lifers, the people that have been listening to us that are part of the 5 million downloads that we've had over the last five plus years, that are the ones that submit questions and testimonials and join our challenges and send us emails and comments on Facebook and DMs and all the thousands of messages we get. We hear this not just from us, but from you, the listener, too. And this article is really going to parse out some of the specifics. We won't nerd out too much, but we want to make sure we give you the nuance or the mindset shifts and the applications and the things you can take action on today to move away from just using fasting as a way to restrict calories and lose some weight on the scale into a long-term lifestyle application, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And when we're putting the different fasting protocols head-to-head like this, and then we're also looking at the very, very important outcome measures because, like you mentioned, the scale, and that's what brought me initially to fasting. But there are so many more things going on and so many more important things going on underneath the surface. So putting these different protocols head to head and then taking a look at those important markers that are actually changing during a fasting lifestyle or a fasting protocol, whether it's 8 weeks or 8 months, or you're adopting it for the long term for a lifestyle. It's good to know what's effective where, especially depending on what your goals are. So that's exactly what we're going to kind of really kind of get into some of those details so we can, be choosing the most effective methods for us depending on what our goals are, right?
So here's the opener, Tommy. Exactly. So here's the opener. When we look at this systematic review and network meta-analysis, there was 38 randomized controlled trials, 3,237 adults, BMI of 27 to 40, right? So mildly overweight up to the second level of the obese category. So 25 to 30 is that overweight category, 30 to 35, 35 to 40. So those three categories of BMI. Mm-hmm. Comparing time-restricted eating, TRE, so aka intermittent fasting, so 16-8, 18-6, 24, 22-2, one meal a day, Those all fall in the intermittent fasting group. So we'll talk about that variability here in just a minute. ADF, which is alternate day fasting, which is one of the most researched fasting protocols in the research annals. It's got the most research on it. So alternate day fasting. So food one day, fasting next day, food one day, fasting next day, or modified ADF where you have a mini meal on that fasting day. And then 5-2, which is 2 days of non-continuous fasting and then 5 days of normal ad libitum, eat whenever and whatever you want, versus continuous energy restriction or calorie counting, calorie restriction, which is what they call CER. And they're comparing all of this to a control group, right? So the studies asked whether fasting is just another way to cut calories, but the physiology suggests when you eat still matters. So it's putting that timing, that time-restricted eating component into the primary seat in truly making change beneath the surface, not just the number on the scale, but the metabolic outcomes. And what were the outcomes, Tommy, before you asked? Glad you asked. Man, that's cheesy host speak right there. Not sure why I just channeled my Bob Barker. Come on down. So the outcomes they looked at were fasting glucose, fasting insulin, HOMA-IR, which is the gold standard for insulin resistance, and A1C, which is what you'll see on your standard blood sugar panel. These durations lasted from 4 weeks to 12 months. Most of them were in the 4-week to 12-week frame. And then, like I mentioned, the populations included the overweight, obese categories, metabolic syndrome, so blood pressure, triglycerides, waist circumference, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, prediabetes, and type 2 diabetes. The majority were not in the insulin-treated type 2 camp, so we're not talking about severe metabolic dysfunction here. But what I look at this population kind of categories that I just word vomited out there, that to me is the general, we call it Gen Pop, the general population of the United States. 1 to 2 of the markers of metabolic syndrome, some labs that are off, blood pressure ticking up, triglycerides elevated, liver enzymes off, carrying some excess weight. 74% of the population in the U.S. is either overweight or obese. On that trajectory for becoming or being in that 80 million Americans that are undiagnosed prediabetics that have some blood sugar mismanagement going on beneath the surface, aka metabolic syndrome. So this speaks to the population at large. So why does it matter? Well, why does fasting glucose, fasting insulin, HOMA-IR, A1C all matter? Because those are the upstream when we're talking about insulin, and the downstream eventuality that we see when you start to have and experience trouble losing the damn weight. The downstream is what we're seeing in your blood sugar numbers. Maybe they're elevated, maybe they're not. Maybe you're somewhere in between. But then upstream is insulin. So if we're going to get to the root cause of why can't I lose weight? Why is it getting harder? Why am I struggling? I'm counting calories, I'm tracking macros, I'm eat less, move more, and it's just not working?
Yeah.
Well, insulin is that gatekeeper to tap into those long-term fat stores. Insert why we're looking at time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting windows, varied across the studies, alternate day fasting, 5-2 versus calorie counting versus the control group. Okay, I just said a lot of words. Did any of that make sense?
It did. And if we can find studies like this that actually pit different levels of caloric restriction up against each other, and then what you'll find is that there is a point of diminishing return. And so what you'll find is that a little bit more calorie restriction does a little bit better as far as moving the needle, whether that's on the scale or it's potentially blood sugar control. It's a couple of other metrics, but it doesn't tend to move the needle very much as far as the blood sugar and then leading into the insulin response. And so what we have here is taking the caloric restriction and then going into the fasting side of things, where you're not just controlling for the amount of energy that's coming in, you're actually controlling for the response within your body to that energy. And then here's where things
So what I just heard there, Tommy, was fat burning versus fat storing.
Correct.
Go ahead.
And then what isn't very easily measured becomes a bigger lever to pull, because the temptation with calorie restriction is that it's really easy to see when you're doing it right. You can easily add things up, you can put it into an app, and then immediately you can get some feedback. Hey, I have a 200 calorie deficit today, I have a 700 calorie deficit today. And over time that should lead to some results. The tricky part is, the more weight that you have to lose, the longer you've had to lose it, and depending on what your biochemistry is, what your genetics are, what your food choices are, we all have different responses to the same foods. So even to the same calories, we don't necessarily have the exact same response to them, because there are many adaptive mechanisms within the body that, just because we have an X number of calories coming in doesn't mean we do the exact same things with them. Because like you said, Scott, insulin is the gatekeeper of those calories. So we can quickly shuttle them into fat storage, or we can utilize more of them more quickly when we're more in fat burning mode. And so that's where the tricky part comes in. So when we look at this study, and then we start to see what are the long-term results when it comes to our 90-day moving average of our blood sugar, our HbA1c, as well as our fasting insulin, then what we see here is that there is a very big difference. There's a statistically significant difference in these methods with respect to the upstream markers. So It's not as easy to measure, hey, am I in an insulin deficit today? That's tricky to measure.
Right.
You really can't measure that at home. Now you can measure your blood sugar throughout the day, and that'll give you some good data, but it's not as easy to confirm as, yes, I had a 500 calorie deficit today. But it's worth doing it, even though you can't measure it as easily, because as we're going to see, the results speak for themselves.
So let's talk about the results. What did the paper find?
Mm-hmm.
So hands down, TRE, most consistent for glucose and A1C reduction.
Nice.
So TRE, time restricted eating, aka intermittent fasting, the best outcome for fasting glucose, for your routine yearly labs where you fast and then they measure your morning blood sugar reading, and your A1C, which is the 90-day average of what your blood sugar is doing, where that glucose molecule is attached to the blood in that first carbon position. Okay, enough nerding out. For other results, ADF, alternate day fasting. So if you're not familiar with ADF, where it's like you fast one day, you eat normal nutrition the next day, fast one day, normal nutrition the next day, air quotes, normal diet. Typically those fasts, Tommy, will range anywhere from 36 up to 48 hours, right? Depending on when you eat, break your fast, and when you start your fast. That aligns with what we see inside of our coaching and our challenges, and all of the feedback we get is that anything past that 48 to 72 to doing a 3 to 5 to 7 day fast, you're getting out of that metabolic switching, weight loss, fat burning kind of sweet spot.
Yep.
And what we see here, because you're getting more into like therapeutic ketosis, therapeutic fasting. So I like to do a 3 to 5 day, 5 to 7 day fast 1 to 2 times a year.
Yep, me too.
Almost like a reset, right? It doubles down on my fasting chops, but it also just gives my body like a, all right, it's time to do a longer fast. Let's do a reset. There's some great research from Walter Longo and senescent cells and high levels of autophagy and all this kind of stuff. But we're talking on a day-to-day here. ADF from this study, what the paper found was ADF improved HOMA-IR and lowered your fasting insulin. It was the only one to from a statistical significance standpoint, to drive that needle. That, again, remember, is the upstream measure or the upstream metric that allows your body to tap into fat burning and prevent all of the insulin-related lifestyle chronic diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease and metabolic syndrome, etc. So when we're looking at this, fasting clearly outperforms. So TRE, most consistent for glucose and A1C reduction. That's going to be blood sugar volatility, shrinking the area under the curve, allowing you to stick to your fast better, to tap into fat stores more, to have more energy. And ADF was the absolute best signal for reducing insulin resistance. 5.2, helpful, but weaker. Didn't really show up.
Yeah.
And one of the things we mentioned initially was when we look at when fasting was directly compared to calorie restriction, there wasn't this outperformance of fasting when weight loss was equated.
Mm-hmm.
So IF often doesn't beat calorie restriction head to head, but here's kind of like the gaps that we see. Tommy, you already mentioned this, the real world adherence and sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't quantify the dropout patterns. It doesn't quantify the simplification. I always say fasting simplified my life.
Yep.
I went to an AI agent conference in New York and flew in late Sunday night, got to the apartment we were staying at, got up early, got to the conference, had dinner that Monday night, and then went right back to the conference Tuesday, then went right back to Penn Station to the airport and flew home and got home around 11:30 that night. I
Wow.
literally only had that one main meal while I was there that entire time.
Talking
My
about simple.
focus was on, my energy was on, my sleep was protected. But just from a lifestyle simplification standpoint, I didn't need to have that post-meal slump when you get back into the main grand ballroom and the speakers are on stage and your eyes are starting to close.
Right.
I didn't need the box lunch. I was like, no, we're going to go to a nice dinner tonight. I'm going to have my meal. Yeah, I'll probably have breakfast in the morning. Work got away from me. Ended up just going straight to the conference. And then when I got home that night from the airport, I was like, yeah, I'm not even hungry. I'm just going to go to bed.
Yep.
So one of the
Simple.
gaps here is it doesn't quantify the sustainability piece. And this is where I'll say it again. Fasting significantly simplified my life. Never mind did I get all of the benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
The physiological benefits and the metabolic benefits as well. So intermittent fasting gives you the ability to have this delay, don't deny.
Mm-hmm.
It gets you away from, what the paper doesn't really talk about is the food noise or the relationship with food or food obsession or decision fatigue, right? Where you get to say, not right now. I'm just not going to eat right now. I'm going to eat later. It just allows you to compartmentalize that lifestyle component a little bit more, in my opinion.
Yeah. And when they take all of these different studies, and many of them had a group that was continuous energy restriction that matched up the caloric deficit to the fasting group. And
Right.
so I want to highlight that just because even like in my mind for a long time, there was this idea that why would I need to fast? It's just another way to get a caloric deficit.
Right.
So where would the difference come in? And so the difference comes in because of the timing, because of the consistent drip nature of a need for a blood sugar response and thus an insulin response in your typical eating pattern, especially when you're 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day, whether it's grazing or it's because you've been told that you need to, stoke your metabolism, whatever the case may be, these are all opportunities for an insulin spike. So unless you are very, very low or almost no carb on a ketogenic or a carnivore type of diet, those will typically end up with substantial insulin spikes over time. And even if those are really well controlled diets, depending on the weight that you have to lose and how your body responds, you might not see any changes in the scale. So that can get very, very frustrating. So when you're taking a look at these results here, and then you see, hey, more fasting tends to move the needle further with respect to these physiological benefits, like what's going on under the hood within your blood work. That makes sense over time. And then you get into the fact that you can, it's shown to be easier to stick with these methods as well, because you have a variability, you have the simplification that you were talking about, Scott, the adaptability of fasting versus the kind of grind of
the rigorous grind of
caloric restriction mixed with the slow slog of the results. And the results aren't even there physiologically for improvements in the blood work, as we can see like all throughout this meta-analysis. So not only does it require more effort, but then the outcomes are so much smaller. And so that gets very demotivating over time.
Yeah, and that's where we look. That's why I started with, the studies we're really looking at is fasting just another way to cut calories, but the physiology is suggesting that the timing when you eat still matters.
Yep.
Right. So where the paper literally kind of missed some of the gaps, and because it wasn't their main focus point, but this is one of the sub points that came out of it, is when we're looking at the lifestyle application component and that simplicity component. Now we can also match the fasting tool to the problem. So if you're worried about your blood sugar and your doc's kind of hounding you, or you're feeling kind of brain foggy and tired and fatigued all the time, TRE is your glucose A1C tool.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got some substantial weight loss resistance, visceral adiposity, you're insulin resistant, right? You took the insulin assessment on the subjective quiz on our website, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm a 9, right? Then ADF, or those longer 24 to 36 to 48 hour fasts mixed in every week, is going to really move the needle for you. So the mechanisms that they were looking at are solid, right? Metabolic switching, AMPK, mTOR, upregulation, body composition change, muscle growth, autophagy, circadian alignment, metabolic mitochondrial flexibility or function. They looked at the mechanisms and they were great, but it doesn't isolate, that tightly controlled intake versus time of day trial. And even without that, TRE, lowered fasting blood sugar. TRE, lowered A1C, intermittent fasting. ADF, alternate day fasting, or those longer extended fasts a couple of times a week, lowered insulin resistance and lowered your fasting insulin number. So the trials are going to measure the lab numbers, but your life has 40 other outcomes that matter too.
Right. Good point.
So I like the simplicity angle. I like the fasting wins. I like the fasting as a tool to regain your health, reverse insulin resistance. We're not chasing the scale. We really want to, work beneath the surface with the iceberg analogy and get those metabolic changes to take place, which just takes a little bit more time under tension.
Yeah.
Or consistency over time.
Yeah, I think the consistency is really a good spot to double down, because what you see in this study is that the majority of the outcome measures were best with an alternate day fasting or a modified alternate day fasting approach. However, we don't find that to be the easiest fasting method to just kind of step into or walk into.
Yep.
And so what that means is like, let's bridge the gap between where we are now and then getting towards that point. And then also keeping in mind that some of these studies were 6 and 12 months. But we've seen a point of diminishing return, usually between the 3 to 6 month mark, with an alternate day fasting approach anyway. So you'll hear us.
Tommy, that's one of the reasons why our coaching is 6 months.
Absolutely.
Because after a trial and error, pun intended, trial and error, we're randomized controlled trials. We found that to be the sweet spot where people really see lasting change.
It's like getting so many swings at the plate where you're seeing the way to kind of bob and weave through your own life and through the seasons of life, and then getting things to stick while you're also developing different tools in your fasting tool belt. Because 1 week to the next, 1 month to the next, they look different, and you can't just be doing the same thing every single day, all of the time. Not necessarily because your body will stop responding to that. If you're in long-term maintenance and you have a good handle on nutrition and things like that, that can work. But typically, it creates a fasting fatigue that's really good to be kind of shifting through your tools.
Yeah, so the reality is, we get a lot of this coming to fasting for weight loss, and then the scale starts moving. You're like, all right, more fasting, right? But you don't have to fast longer to get the benefits. Most benefits come from the shorter windows or the consistent foundational fasting, 16 to 20 hours a day, right? And the metabolic outcomes here that they measured, TRE and ADF, the two things that we coach on and preach on and live, that's pretty much how I live my life, is some form or fashion of those fasting windows. It really quiets the rest of the noise. My relationship with food has changed. We hear this all the time, right? We had a big pizza party for my son a couple weeks ago for his birthday, and had a couple pieces of pizza, enjoyed the party, had one of my wife's homemade cupcakes, had a bunch of protein on the front end earlier in that day. But then by Saturday afternoon, the extra pizza boxes that were in the oven, I don't know if anyone else grew up in a household that put the extra pizza in the oven.
Yep.
That's where it stayed.
Mm-hmm.
We had a couple of pizzas left over. And by Saturday afternoon, I was like, that box, I can just picture it in my head. It was like opening up and it was like, eat me, eat me. And I'm like, all right, we're done with the pizza. Kids,
Right.
want a piece of pizza? No, all right, go on. Get rid of it.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's just simplified my decision making. And so many of the people we hear from is the food noise goes down. Because let's be honest, we live in an obesogenic, food noise, convenient, filled world. You can get anything delivered to your door at any time, unless you live out in the middle of nowhere. It might be a little bit more difficult. So where does fasting win overall as we wrap up here? Well, targeted tool selection. So if we're going to look at blood sugar, TRE, consistent intermittent fasting. If we're going to look at strong insulin resistance, lots of weight, visceral adiposity, weight loss resistance, we're going to look at those longer fasting windows or more of an ADF type strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You're going to see the lab improvements, however you decide to choose your own adventure in restricting your intake. But we found that this fasting structure allows you to delay, not deny, less fear of missing out, less on or off diet mentality, less restarting on Monday after the Friday night happy hour that kind of threw you off the wagon for the weekend, right? The physiology, the timing truly matters. That was one of the main outcomes, is the physiology supports that circadian alignment, that metabolic switching. You are more insulin sensitive in the morning rather than at night. So front load your TRE. Earlier eating windows, prioritize that protein. And then again, the real world advantage for us, which is decrease the food noise, the decision fatigue, and increase the long-term adherence, which is why we always talk about a fasting lifestyle, a transformation process, not just an on-off diet mentality.
Right. Absolutely. And so when we talk about getting into some of those fasts that you may need, depending on what your goals are, then take a look at where you're at now. I'm going to encourage everybody, grab the blueprint to fasting for fat loss.
Yep.
Because that's really going to help you ramp up, get from wherever you are now to whatever schedule that you want to be on, that you want to get better at. You want to tap into some of these longer fasts so that you can get the physiological and blood work benefits, then great. That's going to help you get there. And then also go check out episode 311, where we talk about foundational fasting as well, because it's not just about what is your next longest fast. It's about your consistency, because consistency wins every single time. Get me a 80% on a 20-hour fast across the next 6 months. I'm going to win rather than getting a 40 or 50% success rate on a longer fast, like an ADF fast, over the next 3 to 6 months. It's just going to win. Consistency is going to win. It's a tortoise and hare, right?
Yep. Absolutely. So as we wrap up, I want to give one more shout out to, if you want an accelerated learning curve, you're getting back on track, you're new, you're trying to break through a plateau, you want to dive a little bit deeper, join the upcoming challenge. We got one coming up on June 10th.
Yes.
Typically one of our most attended challenges of the year, but it's totally going to be worth it. Just want to encourage you. The link's in the show notes as well. Yeah, it's on our website, thefastingforlife.com, with a little countdown timer. For you procrastinators out there, I'm speaking to myself. So as we wrap up today, Tommy, in essence, fasting doesn't have to beat every other diet strategy on paper to change your life. When you use the right fasting tool for your current situation and mindset, it can quietly match the lab results of old school calorie counting and calorie restriction while dramatically lowering the friction of actually living it out in real time.
Wow. Well said.
Fasting for the win. Tommy, I appreciate the conversation, man. As always, we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.